to episode 191 of Silver Lining for Learning. Today we're going to do Hosts Reflect, minus a few of the hosts. But here is Curt, just in the nick of time. So we'll have 3 out of the 4, Yong Zhao and Curt and myself. And we're going to spend some time just reflecting on what has happened recently in terms of our episodes and future directions that we see the world going. And it's a good time to do that kind of reflection because it's commencement season in higher education. And so a lot of students and maybe some faculty are reflecting on what is coming for them and how they should position themselves in this crazy world. So since I introduced the episode, I'm going to toss it to one of you to start talking about what you're interested in.
Well, thanks, Chris. I just want to continue the conversation with among us. It's really, I was talking about for 120 years now, the massive, the hypes we've had. We had films, we had telephones, we had television, we had hypermedia, DVDs, then we had the internet. Before that we had the Microsoft suites, and then we have we had the Google search engines, and now we have artificial intelligence. I was actually just wondering, this year I heard, I don't know how true it is, I didn't go to AERA, that a lot of presentations about AI. And I was just wondering about, how are the presentations? How much do we know really about AI, or are we just regurgitating what we know from educational technology and apply it again to say we encourage all teachers to integrate this powerful tool in their classroom? I just wonder about, Chris and Curt, if you have any reactions to that.
Well, let's do a little thought experiment. Let's say that tomorrow morning a new educational technology is going to be invented. We don't know what it is. We just know that it's going to be an educational technology, and people are going to be excited about it. Based on the history of educational technology, I think I can predict some things that will happen, even though I don't know what it is. One of the things that's going to happen is that a whole bunch of people will say, you've got to be using this, right? So I know in the Harvard Graduate School of Education, faculty are being urged, you got to be using AI. Now, as people who've lived through many generations of bright, shiny objects, we know that that's probably not good advice. That these things are not magic, and that uncritical use is more often than not a poor idea. But I'm certain that if this new technology were invented, it would follow in the footsteps of AI, the metaverse, and VR, to name 3 things in the last 5 years that have been in this category. So that's something that we can predict. I can predict that claims will be made for the technology that are well beyond what it can do. And not only what it can do tomorrow morning, but what it can do a year from now, or what it can do 5 years from now. So that's, again, something that we've seen with technology after technology that seems to be a constant. And that's true whether you're talking about the American Educational Research Association, the International Society for Technology and Education, the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development. It's not just the techies. In fact, more often than not, it's the techies that, like us, that are saying, wait a minute, we're not going to do this again, are we? Really? So, yes, I think that the reception of AI at AERA was everything that you would expect from a bright, shiny object. Curt, am I being too cynical about this?
Perhaps, but you've been at this longer than anybody else, so you're definitely someone who would know uh, what has been, where the AI winters have been, where the summers have been, where the springs have been. I'm kind of more focused on where the summers have been and where the summers could be. And so when we think about AI in education, AI in general, everyone in the workforce is kind of wondering how it's going to affect them, but particular, educators, teachers, instructional designers, um, administrators. What I'd like to think about for a second, anyhow, or maybe 5, 10 minutes of this episode is, because this is May 3rd, May 4th. What can we suggest for people who are going to be in hopefully a summer break at some point? What can they do to understand or to ramp up or to appreciate or to feel like they're more knowledgeable at the end of the summer, more competent at the end of the summer than they were at the beginning of the summer? And so I just, what are a few things that they can do, and including myself. I'm thinking about what can I do this summer to better understand, better be better equipped. So, what institutes, webinars, workshops could one go to and attend? What MOOCs could I partake in and learn a little more? What conferences might I travel to? What books might I acquire? What technical guides might I read and download? What people might I talk to? Who might I interview? And take some time out and just chat with on the phone or in Zoom or face to face at a coffee shop. What kind of combined experience could one think about that wouldn't have to commit to any one thing in particular, but have kind of a package that pulls together that one feels a sense of growth individually and then can help their colleagues internally as a result. So that's my goal this summer. Is I put forth a plan this week to my associate dean. Here's some things that I could offer faculty in the fall or in this coming year to better equip them for. In particular, for me, it was talking about AI pedagogy. Or AI publications within the AI field. How could one feel more comfortable and confident in their production? I put the publication side for year 2. I put the AI pedagogy for year 1. So, how can AI help in addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion? How can AI help in creating a class that's more engaging, collaborative, and interactive in nature? How can AI help you motivate these online blended and face-to-face students that we all have today in new ways? How can AI help? We had a session on this with language learning, with those polyglots. How can AI help one become more well-versed in different languages? So, I'm thinking ahead already about what I'm doing. I finished my last paper the night before last and spent yesterday in Indianapolis with my visiting scholars from pretty much sun up to sundown. So I'm a little exhausted here today, but I have summer break now because I got the grades in. Now I can start thinking about what am I going to do? What are the specific things that I can do?
Kurt,
Yeah.
since this is a host reflection, I guess I can challenge you a little bit. If you get on Google Scholar, if you search for AI and education, even in the year since 2024, which is really 5 months, 4 months, there are really millions of papers published.
Oh, yeah.
So in your publication, what do you think you can add anything new? What do you think you can add? I'm now hesitant to publish anything because it's just most of the writings you can search on ChatGPT or Gemini, you get their answers, and it's pretty good answers in all. So what would you be able to add?
You mean you're saying you have millions and millions of papers that AI summarize, not research on AI, right? You're not talking about
you're saying that you can do more AI related publications. So what would you be able to write that gives new ideas?
So my team right now is creating new frameworks for understanding language learning online. And we've modified one. We just got published yesterday in IEEE.
Well, no. Publication doesn't count to me.
Oh,
simple. There's so many bad journals.
Oh, now it no longer counts. This is a new world. Okay.
They can't. Journals like to publish anything. I was just really challenging to say, you can have like 1 million publications. But what matters, as you know, is contribution.
Right.
So what do you think in your understand of online language learning framework that will shed any insight for the future research or practitioners?
You want me to pull up in the implications section?
No. I'm just no. This is I'm not, this is we can all just well, this is a reflection. I think we
Yeah,
reflect our own life, on our own research, on our
sure.
own thinking, because we've been in this field for so long.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the idea
Well,
that
we could offer
application.
some more intelligent feedback within language learning, more adaptive and more responsive, more genuine types of feedback that one could get as a language learner, that one feels like they have someone who's something, a technology in this case, that's providing the support that they weren't getting from a traditional tutor or instructor, or it's available whenever they want to learn these particular languages. Um,
Well, go ahead, Chris.
Well, you kind of jumped ahead because Kurt asked the question about how could he be better informed, and how can anybody be better informed about AI this summer? One thing I would do would be to look at the 5 national AI institutes that NSF has funded in education. The one that I'm part of, but there's 4 others. My AERA symposium that I chaired was about 3 of the 5. And those are serious places where people aren't writing about AI in the morning and selling stock in their startup in the afternoon. In other words, these are people who were doing AI before generative AI. They're people who don't have a financial incentive to hype beyond what AI can actually do. And they're on the front lines of developing and testing things that demonstrate what AI can and can't do at this point in its history. So that would be one thing that I would do. I would look at the websites. I would, if you interview people, I would, find somebody doing something that you think is interesting and meritorious and interview them. Because it's amazing how uninformed most of our quote experts unquote in AI and education are. And there are experts out there who've been working on it for a long time who have technical expertise, not just, kind of general expertise, and you can learn from them. I think the
Well,
Teach
excuse
AI
me, Chris.
website. Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
Chris. I just want to jump in. Is it possible for us to create a few episodes based on the 5 centers, do you think?
We could, but I don't want to turn this into the AI show. I mean,
No.
I think
But I think people would be interested in learning about that. It's not AI show, but anyway, so go ahead. I was just
I'd rather stay with the silver lining for learning motif of what have they done so far that we can celebrate, as opposed to tell us all about your institute. And I think that for some of them, it's appropriate at this point. They've been around for 3 years, 4 years, some based on prior work when they were funded. So yeah, I think we could do something like that. The other thing, Kurt, is that if you, instead of looking at what AI can do, you look at what AI is actually doing. Teach AI, that coalition has done, I think, a really good job of pulling together resources for educators, state policy documents, district policy documents, different kinds of resources on the applied side. So if you want sort of theory and evidence-based, look at the institutes. If you want to apply to look at Teach AI, that would be a good place to start for anybody who's interested in keeping up with the field.
Maybe we need to tell people where Teach AI, or who created Teach AI, and who's in charge of updating it.
So it's a big coalition of, I don't know, 30, 40 different kinds of institutions. And there's a big set of advisors. I mean, I'm one of the advisors, but there's a host of advisors that are bringing in different perspectives. And I just think they've done a good job of curating and a good job of synthesizing in really what's a fast-moving field. And they haven't taken a particular position. They've just said, here's a variety of ways that people are responding. And if you can take one of them that's consistent with your feelings and needs and build on it, then you're not reinventing the wheel.
Chris, I know we don't want to make this a show on your centers, but can you briefly name the 5? So you've named it before in an episode on AI, but for people who didn't listen to that previous show, what are those 5?
So the National AI Institute on Adult Learning and Online Education, which is the one that I'm part of, is headquartered at Georgia Tech. There's one headquartered at the University of Colorado Boulder. The acronym is ISAT, ISAT, that's about student and teacher AI assistants of different kinds. There's one called Engage AI that's at North Carolina State that's about cross-cultural narratives and how AI can engage students through cross-cultural narratives. Those are the 3 that have been around for longer. And then there's one at the University of Buffalo that's essentially about dyslexia and related early childhood challenges and what AI can do to help with that. And then there's one at the University of Illinois at Chicago that's about dispositions, basically, interestingly enough. How can AI help build resilience and tenacity and other kinds of academic dispositions that often people who've been marginalized, struggle with? So it isn't hard to track them down with a little searching, and all of them now are starting to do interesting work and present interesting things, and at least it's evidence-based and theory-based as opposed to just kind of off the cuff. Someone I know who went to ASU GSV said that of the startups, 99% had AI in the title, and the vast majority of them were just selling prompts that you can throw into a raw chatbot, which is a really poor idea in terms of education. But, it's like looking for the quick buck, I guess.
Well, 20
Chris,
years ago, they all had the word smart, knowledge, or collaborative in the title. You walk up and down the trade shows for the e-learning companies in 2000, 2001. I got a little blog post on that. It was really comical. And then you try and have them define collaborative or smart. None of them could, of course. It's all show. It's all, the trinkets, toys, and trash, as one of my colleagues told me. They give away a laptop every hour, but they didn't really have a product to sell, but they got you in the booth anyhow. Anyways, Young, you were going to say.
No, I said I started with AI. I didn't mean to focus on AI, but I do want to ask another question of Chris, because Chris, you endorsed the Charles Fidel book on what AI can do education. I was just simply, I'm not asking to summarize. I was wondering if we could get him on our show to talk about the book. I thought it was an interesting book, and it's self-published. And you endorsed it. Apparently, you read it. So I was just wondering if that's a possibility. Again, not focus on AI, but I really want to focus on how people react to AI as well.
We actually had Charles on the show prior to his doing the book. We had Charles on the show a couple years ago.
Yeah,
I think we could ask Charles to come back and kind of talk about how generative AI has changed his perspective about AI. But I wouldn't want it to be just Charles. I think what we should do is think about another guest or two that could create that interesting kind of tension. Because there are many different viewpoints about AI, and a show that contrasts some of them is I think what we should be aiming for.
yeah. Thank you. Well, anyway, there's that's another thing I think is I was since I was on the show last week with primarily Pakistan, I was, there's a lot of charitable organization we're talking about, like in India, in various places, I think right now. So I'm just really thinking about institutions, learning institutions outside the system. And in the U.S., we had interviews with with different clubs, different ways of doing. So how the new technology enables a different type of learning, especially how possible is it today now to deliver truly student driving personalized learning? Like I get a little bit from here, I get a little bit from there, I get a little bit from there. I was just wondering about that. I think that's possibly some new possibilities because in essence, you do not have to go to a learning institution to learn something. I also saw news saying in the US right now, a lot of kids don't want to go to colleges. I also saw that in New York, a bunch of private schools closed. We're closing a lot of universities now. So this is a very interesting time. Something from a bigger perspective. How much can the learning system, school system, still control student learning?
Well, I think two things. First, I think probably all of us as co-hosts have done a lot of thinking about self-directed learning and have different perspectives on self-directed learning. And that would be a fun theme to go with for a while because it really ties into something that my late colleague Clay Christensen talked about, which is disruptive innovation. That when you say, let's look at the places that things are happening outside the formal system, the interest is in finding things that can scale that could eventually lead to the formal system being undermined because people would vote with their feet to go to this new thing that's better. And so thinking about disruption, thinking about self-directed learning, I think this is an interesting time to be doing that work. I don't know, Curt, you've published a lot on this. What your thoughts are?
Well, I just popped in the article from yesterday that was published in IEEE Transactions and Learning Technologies, reconceptualizing learning in the era of generative AI and exploratory analysis of language learning. And we've got three others, two of which were published previously, one that's in press. And, I've seen the cycles, the wheels repeated over and over, the waves. This is a new wave, type of wave we haven't experienced before, because this is a transformative wave. We've had all these incremental waves, or waves that come in and gone back out, and we never hear from them again. We've had the cycles of technologies. AI is more than a technology. It's a key part of one's learning environment, I think, today and tomorrow, and for sure in 10 years from now. Unlike the technologies that we've seen in the past. And so it offers more in the era of self-directed learning than any other technology can offer, because it is there to provide just-in-time strategic support as you deem needed. You can turn it off, right? And that can self-direct your learning right there. Just shut the whole thing down and decide what you want to include in your learning environment. You don't have to have it. You don't have to include it. It's there for us. I just read through a week's worth of papers in two of my classes, and I read a lot of them on AI and on new technologies that are coming out. And no one's really thinking about how the various technologies all fit together to potentially create these more self-directed learning environments. These one-off stories are 2 different or 3 different technologies they're using in their classrooms or their schools or whatever, but they're not thinking beyond that. They're not thinking about the bigger picture at all. I don't get any sense of that anyhow. I know, Chris, you talked in my learning environments class in the fall, and we're able to provide some big picture perspective, but that's not the norm. That's not how we're trained to be, and when people are in graduate school, they write these one-off papers about a couple things that they've done. They're never, not often anyhow, thinking about the larger transformative environments that could be created and not too difficult to create them today, you know. But what I did see in our Canvas discussions every week, we had AI augmented discussions. People use Claude and Gemini and Copilot and ChatGPT and really intuitively engage in an engaging way. I was really thrilled to see how they were able to adapt to an AI augmented discussion forum and really look forward to the contributions that the AI platforms would make to those discussions and debate them, and reflect on them. So I saw some hope there briefly, but most of what I saw is really the typical one-off solutions. I hope our research in online language learning is not a one-off solution. We think about the bigger picture of self-directed learning. So what we've designed is a set of guidelines for self-directed learning, 2, a checklist for self-directed learning, and 3, a new assessment scheme for self-directed learning in those language learning environments, or an adaptation of Janet Hill and Lillian Song's model for self-directed learning. There's also Randy Garrison's model for self-directed learning and others that are out there. So there's several models that have been developed in the past for SDL. One thing I have seen, even my dissertation prep class, the number of students who are interested in self-directed learning is dramatically increasing. So it's not just because I'm here. Even my students who are advisees of my colleagues are also studying self-directed learning. So there is that understanding, especially those who are more in the corporate space. They're seeing that people in the corporate world are having to self-direct and their normal training programs don't exist anymore. And so they're trying to understand that and wrap their heads around it. Even those orientation sessions for new employees, right, are self-directed in nature. I once had a job offer at General Electric in Waukesha, and I swear the training manual was this high, and that was volume 1, and then I could get the volume 2. I didn't last more than 3 days reading those, and I was out. So go ahead, Young. You've been trying to jump in.
No, I was just wondering. Because Chris, thanks for using the term, bringing the idea of self-direct learning. I was wondering if you guys see any difference between self-direct learning and personalized learning.
Yeah, I do. I think that personalized learning does involve agency. It does involve voice and choice, but it also often involves some kind of another person who's like a mentor or a coach who is personalizing things for you, sort of like a learning partner. And I think true self-directed learning, maybe you go out and look for learning partners when you want one, but the agency is really, you really are more on your own in terms of learning, and you might choose to personalize your learning, but it's hard to personalize your learning because you only see yourself as you see yourself. You don't see yourself as others see you, and that's an important part of personalized learning as well. I just think that we're moving to a time when people need to be constantly learning. They can't be constantly getting formal education. It's too expensive. It's too time consuming. And so at some point, they have to say, I know enough now that I can kind of take charge of my lifelong learning and make that self-directed. And of course, that doesn't simply involve knowing knowledge and skills. It involves emotional beliefs like self-efficacy. It involves dispositions. So it's a complex assessment of when you're ready for self-directed learning. But ultimately, that's what we should be preparing people for. We should, just like doctors try to put themselves out of business by advising people to live healthy lives, we should be trying to put ourselves out of business in formal education by preparing people to do self-directed learning.
I like that a lot. So I mean, in essence, schools do not offer self-directed learning. I mean, some schools do, but mostly they don't. And I think it's the self-directed learning is the one that you get to pursue your own curriculum. You got to pursue your own goals. Personalized learning is typically controlled by the same curriculum, same assessment, same expectations. So Curt, you have anything you want to jump in and talk about personalized learning and self-directed learning? I don't mean to control the topic of the conversation. These are just some of the issues I'm thinking about recently.
I naturally reflect on personalized learning as being more other generated. You don't have full control over that learning environment. Whereas self-directed learning, you're more empowered. You're more autonomy. You have more. It is your world you're creating. Whereas personalized learning, especially the Bill Gates version of it, especially the Khan Academy side of it, is someone has created that environment for you. They know better than you, and they understand your bugs and your thinking, and can create ways to ameliorate those bugs, right? But that's not fully the case, but that is the case of the past, personalized learning environments that were created. I think today it's shifting a bit. When we had Chuck Zubin on this show talking about personalized and adaptive learning, it was more about student empowerment in those environments, and I see that as a pleasant evolution of our understanding of personalized learning. But no, you read any essay that Bill Gates puts out there nowadays, it's still about how he can fund systems that can fully understand where the learner is at, and he can create the right guidance for you to go that next step. Whereas self-directed learning is you're deciding on what those next steps would be. It's you that's empowered, and you have the say. It's not no one on the outside controlling it. You're not a puppet anymore. So that's how I differentiate things. But you may disagree, Yong.
No, I don't disagree. I'm just wondering because there are so many different phrases. I've written about. I've criticized the traditional definition of personalized learning in schools. I've been advocating for self-directed learning, still with the assistance of adults, with facilitation, with support, all those kind of things. Because I was doing some review of systematic review, meta-analysis by Rand Corporation, a number of others talking about personalization, personalized learning. I think it's still personalized for the students, not personalized by the students. I think that's the message I was trying to talk about.
That's it. For versus by. You got it. That's nicely done and said.
Yeah.
So let me shift a little, but I think this is still related. Let's talk about how expertise is changing. I mean, I think that I encounter, quote, experts, unquote, who stopped learning. They feel like they've completely mastered everything in their field. And whatever you bring up to them, they say, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, here's the answer. And maybe that can be the case in a field like statistics, where mathematics isn't changing month by month. But most things, an expert isn't defined by what they know, because the half-life of knowledge today is relatively short. To be an expert, what you really have to do is you really have to be good in a self-directed way of figuring things out and finding what you need to learn in order to figure things out. So each of us has had to unlearn some things that we may have thought about online learning, let's say, or AI 5 years ago. And now we've unlearned those because we are not the kind of static experts, we're dynamic experts. And we're busy thinking about, well, what can I do this summer to learn this new reality and to retain my expertise in process? And I think, again, that's kind of contrary to the flow, because The conventional wisdom, as you know, is that if you want to make somebody an expert, you just stuff their head as full as you can with knowledge and skills, and then they're an expert. They bought the t-shirt, they're ready to go. Not in today's world.
You know, that Chris brought me to this issue of AI again. Remember they would used to talk about distributed cognition when many years ago. That if you are better at using to this technology, AI systems, search engines, your expertise suddenly grow a lot more than those who don't, right? You know, that's and if you know how to solve a problem by using those tools, that will be different. So I think, you know, this actually relates to the issue about when you do self-directed learning, like for example, can you find uh, learning partners wherever they are? Some people are very good at finding them. Some people are not. I think maybe the idea about expertise, like you were saying, it's more dynamic. It's more co-evolutionary with the tools and with the people around you. I think that's kind of interesting. And Curt has a distributed cognition with his dog.
I'll get Oliver on the show. Say hi, Oliver, to everybody. What do you think about self-directed learning?
I remember Oliver from your books that you sent around about your walks with Oliver.
Yes, he's a character. He's a character. I'm sorry, Young, your question for me?
No, I was just, Chris and we were just talking about the changing nature of expertise and expert.
Yes,
I said I was thinking about, you know, distributed cognition was quite powerful. I don't read a lot of distributed cognition now, but I think it makes more sense when you
Yes.
distribute it not only among other people, but among, you know, the various tools that you have.
It's interesting how we go through these waves and don't exactly match up with the technologies that are out there. I remember Gabby Solomon in 1995 speaking in Netherlands at the early conference, just saying technology's gone beyond where theory is. And you know, in that case, in the case of distributed cognition, technology's finally caught up to where theory's been at. So it's often not a mesh between or marriage between where theory is and where technology is at one particular point in time. It might be a real interesting show to reflect on learning theories and the evolution of technology, you know, and what the parallels that have happened or haven't happened over time. But you're right, someone needs to rethink what distributed learning is in today's age and how the tools in our environments and the learning environments that we're trying to create kind of are influenced by ideas about distributed learning or have come about in an era where distributed learning makes a lot more sense, you know, and we need to tap into that and maybe do more research on it, maybe create new models of education based on distributed learning ideas that were out there 20, 25 years ago, right? Chris, you're going to add to that.
Well, I'm sort of stepping back for a minute and thinking about our post reflect episodes. And you know, now that I'm moving off of salary and I'll just be on soft money, I'm starting to think about how can we monetize Silver Lining for Learning. And my first idea is that we should sell the four of us as a graduation speaker thing, because the four of us together could give a really interesting graduation speech. You know, not the standard kind of, look at me, I'm important. Now you can be important too. But, you know, we have some interesting tensions in our ideas. And I think that would be a direction that we should consider, put ourselves out there.
That's a good idea, but we can head out to Harvard or USC so we can get canceled. But anyway, that's I was going to invite you, Chris and Curt, to reflect on the episodes I was not part of. You know, the last episode I was with Curt, talk about the National Educational Technology Plan, which was interesting, but I never thought any national education technology plan has any hope of any real impact in the U.S. You know, we've seen a lot of those. I think it's I mean, it's great document. I have to say, wonderful. So what else did you guys talk about, when I was gone to China?
Well, you were there last week, weren't you, at the Digital
I
Schoolhouse, the
was there
One Room
last week.
Digital
I just
Schoolhouse?
mentioned that last week. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think 3 weeks.
Yeah. Oh,
You
Well,
don't remember?
actually, I missed the ones on the National Ed Tech Plan because I had conflicts. So the other one that I think you missed, Young, was the one on the journal issue on higher education futures at the intersection of hope, justice, and ed tech.
Yeah, yeah. I
Because
know.
because I
Okay.
think that and the one last week are kind of what we had. Because before then we were celebrating our
Right.
4 years,
Yeah.
and so we didn't have a substantive episode for a while.
I
Not
also
substantive
missed
in
the
having a single theme.
conversation. Yeah, I also missed the part 2 of the EdTech plan conversation. I think that's another one I missed, is there. But I mean, if you guys want to talk a little bit about that, might be useful. I don't know how your reaction was because, as I said, into national education technology plans, I always think it's good exercise. It's wonderful to think about, but they really have no teeth. It's not. It's not even democratic summary of the knowledge, right? It's just based a group of people who get there to write this then based on their understanding, So
well, some of the National Ed Tech Plan the second show was about the history of the plan itself and how people were tapped to get involved and who the influence each of them have had on each other, how they got to know each other, and how they collaborated together to write the respective pieces, and the respect they had for one another actually really came through in that show. Each of the people that were involved, played a central role in the development of the report. We didn't have, I mean, the week with you, we had the kind of the leader of, Chase was involved that first week, and he kind of got he was involved in the 2016 report, right? And the 2016 report didn't have specifics. What they tried to do in the 2024 report was provide specific things that are happening in each state, in each US territory, so that people could relate if they're in Guam or Puerto Rico or, whatever part of the country they happen to be in. So that was kind of interesting that the scope was thought about that hadn't been thought about previously. But there's only so much one can do in a, 70, 80 page written report. You got plus 20 of pages of references there, so I guess that was one thing that struck me was
well, no, I was not, I was more talking about how is there any real influence on policy or practice with such a document, such a good exercise? That's what I was thinking. The people involved in had fun. It was always interesting. Like how many people who, like even scholars. Well, Chris, you've been in this field long enough. Do, real scholars actually treat document like that as resourceful, as respected? That's what I meant,
Well, it varies, I think, depending on which plan you're talking about. I was involved on the edges of many of them, but the plan that I think was sort of groundbreaking was the 2010 plan that had a really strong group of people on it. Barbara Means put a really strong group of people together, and it was innovative in the things that it said. So there was a whole chapter critiquing high stakes assessment and saying that we're not measuring what matters, and we need to do that. There was a whole section on grand challenges that said education should have some grand challenges. And here's examples of what those grand challenges might be at this point in history. Those were really innovative. And I think that plan, it didn't have any teeth. None of the plans have any teeth. But if you say it should be an aspirational vision in the way that sometimes people talk about the Horizon reports as an aspirational vision for technology, I think that the 2010 plan did a good job of that. I think some of the other plans have been more political exercises. And it isn't interesting now to think about what can be done at the national level in education in a country that's so relentlessly bottom up as the United States is.
So what I found in reading again my student papers this past week, there were a lot of them that had read the plan. Now I didn't make it required. It was something I tossed out when the report came out. I said, here, you might think about reading this. There are a number of people who actually read it and included it in their papers. So students are reading these. And they should be, if they want to get the big picture, which I was complaining about earlier, the lack of seeing the big picture. Here's a place where they can start getting it. And it was students across different fields, but in particular, my K-12 students were grabbing it and reading it and reflecting on what, and that's natural. It's that they should. Some of them were district leaders within their schools, and so it could help them in their planning and strategic planning committees that they're on, no doubt. But they were thoughtfully reflecting on it in their respective papers. So I was smiling when I was reading that. So there's hope out there for. It doesn't have to be read by every politician. It should, it should. But if we're having the grad students are reading it, that's an important population. Those are the future leaders of the field, right? So
well, it's an interesting challenge actually for our students. At Harvard's Graduate School of Education now, we have less than 1/3 of our students that are domestic. So, more than 2/3 are international. And of course, overwhelmingly, they come from countries with national ed tech plans. And so those have teeth and you have to take them really seriously. And I think it's difficult for them to understand the chaos that involves educational decision-making in the United States. And then I think it's also difficult for the faculty who haven't taken the trouble to understand other educational systems outside of the US to understand what the students are talking about when they say, no, everything's centralized, everything's top down. Many of the faculty, unfortunately, are kind of clueless about what that means. And if more than 2/3 of your student body, that's the context they're coming from, then as faculty, we'd better, understand that context too.
Chris, on that note, I actually think the EdTech plan, the national plan in the US, has more impact outside the US because many other countries, like you said, they do centralized plan, and US is always the top country they want to learn from. And where do they go? They do the EdTech plan. They translate that, they publish that, and they actually let a lot of people know. So other countries study the plan probably more carefully than many Americans. So it's it's considered as a global service. I think it's something that affects other places. I know Curt has to go. Curt, you want to reflect a little bit on the higher education futures? Again, I missed that episode.
Well, wait, let's not worry about that episode. Curt, imagine that you're giving the commencement speech. You've got 5 minutes here before you have to disappear. What advice do you have for not just the graduates, but for all of us as to at this point in history? What would your commencement speech be?
Oh God, and then you don't have 30 seconds to plan either. You can't check out ChatGPT or Gemini to give you your speech, right? So, I'd pick something out of my leadership learning and life calendar about, planning your next steps and where you're going to be. The life is full of flexibility and openness. And if you don't take advantage of the flexibility and openness in front of you, or don't have flexibility and openness, you really think your life, because this is an age where we're going to have so many choices and opportunities to learn, to teach others how to learn, or the ways in which you learn. So the key words I would say is flexible in your job path, flexibility in your life path, flexibility in your health path. People in the UK that I bumped into in Australia call themselves flexible learning consultants. that notion being, flexible life learners, flexible life learners is really going to become more and more true as we see the avenues that one can learn in, the different ways that we can learn with each other or learn by ourselves. We have to take advantage of that. So look at the options in front of you. Don't look at static. The first job offer you have is limiting your life path and where you're going to go. Think about the next move and the move after that and the move 20 years from now and how they're all going to fit together eventually, because something will make sense 20 years from now and 30 years from now when you reflect back on it. None of it would make sense if you just think iteratively today to tomorrow to the next day to the next year and to the next decade. You should start thinking about how some of the pieces can commingle and fit together in the choices that you're making, how they're creating who you are. And you have to be purposeful in the creation of who you are. And part of that is being aware of how you can learn today and how it's changing. And again, the choices, the flexibility, and the options that you have, be it in a blended hybrid high flex format, be it in a self-directed fully online format, be it in a face-to-face occasional format. That's what I'd say, because the world is open to you and the world's going to be even more open to all of you 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now.
I think that's great. It's a message of hope. If the commencement speaker doesn't show up, I'm willing to vote for you to get up there and nail the talk for them.
Well, at least I had a dry run. So if I do get asked, I'll be much better at it because I'll probably add a few more things to it. I have commenced for all of you out there. We have commencement for our School of Education students. Lineup is at 1:15. I'm 10 minutes from campus and another 5-minute walk to where I'm gonna have to leave shortly. And our campus undergraduate event is tonight. Yesterday was our graduate school event. So the graduate students get the two events. They get yesterday's university event and today's School of Ed, and we're walking to the MAC, our Musical Arts Center, for this performance. So it's really cool. It's the first time I'll be in the MAC for commencement of our School of Education students. And like Harvard, 2/3 of our students at least are international students. This is any public university today, any private university today that's large in nature. And, it's beyond the mid-ranked schools. It's going to be mostly international students.
Yeah. Well,
best wishes, Curt.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I'm going to hang around for a minute or two and listen, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Don't you guys have protests on campus?
We did, and we have probably going to lose our president as a result. Was already a vote of no confidence 3 weeks ago. Now there's another vote. Whether she should stay in the provost, and it got pretty bad. One of my colleagues in the School of Education was, arrested and told she can't come back for a year or so, and she's one of our best qualitative researchers. So, yeah, we had faculty in anthropology arrested. They were tearing down student tents. I mean, harmless stuff, but it got vicious. And they had snipers on the roof of our IMU, Indiana Memorial Union. It was not good.
Well, as part of reflection, before you leave, I asked Chris about this. So do you think this is like Bernie Sanders talking? This is Biden's Vietnam? Should students protest on university campuses in the US?
Well,
hello? You did not hear me? Hello?
We may have lost Chris on this one.
No, I think Chris is
I'm here.
Okay.
He was asking you.
I was asking you, yes.
Me or Chris?
Because I'm a foreigner. I did not come in here during the 60s. So I was wondering how big this protest is compared to the 1960s.
It's smaller than in my mind, it's a lot smaller than the 60s because every day there were, I grew up in Milwaukee. Father Grappi had marches going on downtown. It was on TV every day. So this was a one-off event at Indiana one time, I mean, they've had a couple things since, of course, but and protests, but no, this is much smaller scale than what
Yeah.
the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War movement, the women's rights movements, you name it. The 60s was filled with protests and, you know, violence, you know, that all, across all walks of life. It was, as a young kid in that age, it struck me. It stays in my memories. You know, so it's something I don't want to see again. But in some ways, we're re-experiencing aspects of what was going on in the 60s. And we can say, oh, I saw that in the 60s. I saw that, I experienced something like that. But it's not anywhere near what it would felt like to live in the 1960s, at least yet. And it could happen. Of course, we had the Black Lives Matter movement, right? And we had other, you know, cancel culture. We've had various things in the past few years that are starting to accumulate, right, over time, but it's still, yeah, still not comparable. Chris?
I agree with you 100%. The body bags were coming in every day in Vietnam. That changes everything.
Yes. Yeah,
Well,
they're coming off the plane every day in Mitchell Field, you know, and you know, we'd see that on any channel you watch, in every paper you read. It was front page of every paper, and you know, it was
well, this
very
is all
sad
very
times.
new to me because you know I came in the 1990s, so this is and university campuses I was not aware of any of this, you know. So this is it's quite new to me, you know. I tried.
Combine that with race riots that was going on at the same time, you know. So, and there's extreme tensions everywhere you walked, you know.
I mean, you know better than I, Young, but Tiananmen Square, you know, would be an example.
Oh, I
or
was part
something.
of that. That
Yeah,
was
yeah,
great.
okay. Well, that's something where there was real violence. I mean, and not just one time. And you know, the Mao's revolution with 1,000 flowers, that was, you know, again on a scale well beyond anything that we're seeing today.
Well, I remember before when when I was probably like 2 to 3 year olds, I remember me scared, even in the countryside, in the villages. People are trying to, you know, the Red Guards, they're trying to throw violent things against each other. So well, that's just that was deliberate and politically motivated. Everybody was, you know, defending Mao Zedong. I was young. I was, you know, that was just like 1967, 68. But Curt, best wishes. Good luck.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, I'll see you guys.
You
Okay,
bet.
take care. Yeah.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Yeah. So, Chris, what just you want to introduce next episode? I don't know who is creating the next episode.
Let me quickly look and see what the next
I don't see
episode
that.
is. All right, so we're going to be
It's not
having
here.
an episode on the Builders Club in Minecraft.
Oh, okay.
And of course, Minecraft was a major cultural phenomenon that eventually was acquired and now is more part of the educational establishment, but still seems to have a following. And making, which Minecraft is part of, is a large and interesting movement, because making is about self-directed learning, perhaps more than many other types of education. So we look forward to seeing you next week, and we'll have an interesting episode to discuss. And it's at noon. It's at noon Eastern. So see you then, Jan.